But thank you for having me. I'm Nancy Carr Smith. I'm here, as I said, representing myself. And just for the last year and a half or so, I've been on the Land Use Commission as the Hawaii Island rep. And prior to that, I sat for 5 years on the Leeward Planning Commission. And prior to that, another 5 years on the Board of Appeals. And prior to that, a couple of years on the South Kohala CDP Action Committee when it first started. So that, along with my real estate profession, which has been happening for 36 years. So what is the Land Use Commission? The Land Use Commission is comprised of 9 unpaid volunteers, 1 from each island, and 5 at large. So I represent Hawaii Island, and many of you know Miles Miyasato. He also sits on the Land Use Commission as an at-large position. The term is 4 years, and you can have 2 terms, so it can be as much as 8 years. We have a chair and 2 vice chairs, and we elect officers annually. We travel to whatever island the property that we're talking about is on and have our meeting around that. The LUC staff consists of an executive officer, a couple of planners, and support staff. And we fall under the State Office of DBET, the Department of Business and Economic Development and Tourism. So for administrative purposes, we're under DBET. We operate under the Roberts Rule of Order, and we do abide by the Sunshine Law. We have deputy attorney generals who represent us as a commission. We're required to file financial disclosures. We're required to attend Hawaiian law classes and ethics classes and anything else that they feel is necessary. Commissioners are appointed by the governor and approved by the state senate. We're responsible for managing and regulating land use in the state of Hawaii to promote orderly development while protecting valuable resources. So the history and the evolution of the land use, the state land use law, which is chapter 205 of the Hawaii Revised Statute, was adopted by the state legislature in 1961. The land use law established an overall framework of land management whereby all lands in the state of Hawaii are classified into 4 sections. And the goal was to ensure orderly growth and resource conservation. And then the commission was formed to regulate that land use law. So the 4 land classifications are conservation, agricultural, urban, and rural. Conservation lands are basically set aside for environmental, cultural, and recreational purposes. They often include forests, waterways, and protected areas. You'll see our island has a lot of that. Agricultural lands are generally for farming and ranching, including important agricultural lands. And these are kind of general descriptions, but as we all know, our island has a lot of ag designated land that is nothing near agricultural land. So that's one of the challenges that I think we have as a county. Urban is supposed to be areas for cities, towns, and residential, commercial, and industrial development. And rural is low density residential and small farms. So this is the state land use designation locator, which can be found on the Land Use Commission website. But you can see that the white areas are ag lands, the green are conservation, and the red areas are basically urban. You can see the small amount of lands that are in urban. Yeah, the urban lands are just over 2% of our island. Kind of amazing. Conservation is over 50%. Agricultural lands are 47%, and rural is 0.1. So every once in a while, you'll see a little rural area. But as you can see, there's a fair amount of room for improving our urban or rural areas. Yeah, here's a little rural area up in Honolulu. But I find this kind of fascinating. I don't know what you folks do, but and look in Ka'u, it's barely any urban either. So that's what we're talking about. All these lands have a designation, right? It's one of those 4 designations. And then that affects what you can do on your land, right? Of the Land Use Commission website. It's pretty easy to navigate. You can find a lot of things here. You can learn about the LUC, the history, the DBA procedures, land use districts. That's where that map was found. If you want to look at any pending documents, pending dockets that are still outstanding, you can look through here, special permits, status reports, and such. So completed dockets are over here as well for boundary amendments and others. So that's a resource that you can use. Let's talk about what else the Land Use Commission does. The kuleana is to hold hearings that are requested for district boundary amendments, which is reclassifying the lands from one category to another. And I'll get deeper into that in just a few minutes. But we also consider requests for special permits on ag land over 15 acres. We hear declaratory rulings. We consider important ag land designations as well. A few key milestones in Hawaii land use policy that I came upon that I thought was interesting, so I thought I would share it with you. In the 70s and 80s, as urban expansion continued, concerns grew over the loss of prime ag land. And that's when the Land Use Commission tightened regulations to prevent speculative development from converting ag to land too easily. In 1975, there was a Hawaiʻi state plan, and it reinforced land controls and integrated planning more. So the planning aspect was kind of beefing up. In the 90s, there was a push for sustainability and environmental protection, leading to stricter oversight, especially in the conservation districts, which, as you saw, was significant on our island. There have been court rulings that have occurred over the years that influence how the Land Use Commission makes its decisions. The most popular and the most, maybe you've heard of it, and it has the most influence over us, is the Kapa'akai case, which was in the year 2000, and it did originate on this island in North Kona, in the area that we sometimes refer to as Hualalai, in the Ka'upulehu area. So this is when the Land Use Commission approved a petition to reclassify land for resort and residential development. And Kapa'akai, Oka'aina, along with other Native Hawaiian and environmental groups, challenged the decision, arguing that the LUC had failed to adequately protect Native Hawaiian traditional and customary rights. So now it is our obligation to make sure that petitioners are abiding by Kapa'akai. The 3 items of importance is identifying traditional or customary practices on that property, determining the extent to which these practices might be affected, and then to ensure that feasibility protection measures are in place so that those practices can be upheld. So those are the 3 things. So it's become a standard ask of petitioners. And even in the last year, people were still coming to us, not realizing that they have to do that. So it's a matter of them having a cultural impact study that includes a Kapa'akai analysis. And then we have to make a decision whether we accept that analysis or not. The key function that we're talking about here is district boundary amendments, right? So that's reclassifying, for example, ag designated land to urban, let's say, so that a person can develop or build homes. Who can reclassify land? It's the landowner, developer, state or county can also ask for boundary amendment adjustments. So the steps in that process, there's an application process. There's several other steps in between, but then there's a hearing. Our hearings are quasi-judicial, so it's kind of like a courtroom, in that the parties to the hearings all have to swear under oath that they're telling the truth. There's testimony, there's evidence, and yeah, it's pretty formal. And the Land Use Commission actually acts as the judge. So the parties to these petitions are the petitioner, the person coming before us. They generally have a planning professional with them, oftentimes an attorney too. And then the county, whatever county the property is in, that county planning department is a part of the process as well. So they review the petition and they weigh in on all county aspects of it. Department of Water Supply, and others. So, and then there's also the state playing a role, and that is OPSD, the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. So they have a seat at the table too, and they bring input from Department of Ag, Department of Transportation, Department of Health, DOE, bless its heart, and CWRM. So that's the Commission on Water Resource Management. So all of those state agencies weigh in and give their input to the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. And then when they're at the table, they weigh in with all of that information. So the burden of proof is on the petitioner to show good cause. And on DBAs, we need to have 6 affirmative votes. So it's more than, what a quorum is. And again, I will state this fun fact that we haven't had a DBA since 2010. And, you might ask why, and there's different viewpoints on this. I think the process has kind of been made to be very challenging. I've been told by some people we'll do anything that we can to not have to go to the Land Use Commission. And so that's where, the DBAs that fall under the state's purview is anything over 15 acres, right? So the county is the authority for anything under 15 acres. So you oftentimes see under 15 acres so that people can only have to deal with the county and not the state. So I'm here to tell you that we're trying to make the process more friendly. The commission has changed some, and we're trying to encourage people to come back to the Land Use Commission with their projects so that we can have good dialogue, not trying to be a powerful state agency, but good dialogue, working with the counties and other agencies to try to make some housing happen. It was asked what public participation can look like. It's really just in the form of public testimony. And I always encourage people, especially if they support a project. And I say that only because if you oppose a project, it's easy. People go and oppose projects all the time, right? And that's what most of the testimony is opposition. So that's the louder voice, and that's what commissioners hear. But I encourage people to get more involved and provide positive testimony whenever they feel that way. How else communities can participate? It's really doing what you folks are doing, right? It's bringing all the parts together and figuring out where the pukas are and what can be done to bridge all those gaps. So In Waimea, for example, we have workforce housing underway with Keith Kato with HICDC. I don't know whether Keith's a part of this group or not, but he's working to develop some lands that were donated for affordable housing. So he's doing workforce housing, and then there'll be some affordable later. We have another project in Waimea that's supposed to be on Parker Ranch lands. It seems to be a little stalled. But, you know, if those happen, then my community, for example, will be in fairly good shape with the affordable part of things. And then it's still additional senior housing and that middle market housing, again, that product that we used to all love, that $400,000 to $600,000 product that is so hard to find now. My husband and I were just in Arizona for spring training in Scottsdale, and we were amazed by the number of condominium and apartment complexes, just lots of really tall buildings. And we asked a couple people about it, and they said our community wanted to go up. We didn't want to go out. We didn't want to have the urban sprawl outside of town. We wanted everything to be close in town, walkable, and they seem to be accomplishing that. And I know that's something that was maybe pushed back, especially on our island. We're used to being rural and low and lots of open space and stuff, right? But these are just different things that we might have to consider. So in response to Hawaii's ongoing housing crisis, the governor's plans to increase housing throughout the state has been significant, and he's in support and has done some things that make that easier. So Land Use Commission, several members of the Land Use Commission are very much in favor and trying to do what we can to go in that direction. The commission's a mix of volunteers who sometimes have differing opinions about what should occur in terms of those DBAs. And some are convinced that we can't afford to let go of our ag lands. The fact that we import so much food, I mean, it makes sense, right? You can't help but say, we need to protect our ag lands. How can we be importing 90% of our food, but yet at the same time, we're not really using our ag lands in that way. So it's really a tough situation. In Waimea here, farmers are getting old and their kids don't want to farm. And then we have, you know, some small projects that want to take place, and there's a lot of pushback because people think that we're using up all the ag land, but yet there's ag land all around and it's not being used. So it can be frustrating. I understand everybody's opinions, and it just makes it hard to be successful in growing housing. So yeah, so it's a challenge for developers, right, to go through the process and get community buy-in. They're often charged with adding additional infrastructure, or building more roads, or supporting schools, or, you know, all these things sound great, but it just makes their projects not pencil out. So they often don't build them. And that's why we see a lot of DBAs that are 10, 20, 30 years old and have never been built. Sometimes they change hands along the way, and then they have to come back to us. But, you know, we're seeing a lot of that, old DBAs, but we're not seeing anything new. So some of the things that I learned through my research about what could help increase housing without significantly reducing agricultural lands. Some key options were infill development and higher density in the urban areas that we already have. And that includes the accessory dwelling unit, which we know is already in place here, and yay for that. Hopefully it'll work in some cases. I'm sure it won't in all, but it might add some housing to the mix. for our local families. Policy changes like upzoning can help maximize land use without expanding the urban boundaries. So again, that's going up. Encouraging redevelopment of underutilized or vacant properties. I saw that was part of what Kohala was working on, finding some of those vacant properties that could be turned into something else, which is wonderful. Yeah, I'm not going to get into the rural part of it too much because I know that when I've gone to planning conferences over the years, there are planning directors and people at the state level who keep saying we need to have more rural designation. And the counties seem to push back on that for the most part. Not necessarily in all cases, but for the most part. And I don't totally understand why. And so I don't really want to speak to it because I don't totally get it yet. But I suppose that could be one way to go as well. Agriculture cluster housing, which I know that there was some legislation that was put forth this year for adding more ag housing. I don't think it is still alive. I didn't get a chance to check on a couple of those bills that we're trying to create more housing on ag land for actual ag use for farm villages or whatever you'd like to call them. But that is certainly something that keeps an idea that keeps coming up. Reuse and revitalization of existing structures, public and private partnerships and affordable housing incentives. Those are all things that are happening as well. And more smart growth and better planning with TODs, transient oriented developments. And that's something that I know certain communities on our island are working on some TODs. Such an interesting island that we live on that has so many different communities, and each community kind of has their own needs.